with the quadratic formula. And I'm going to try not to bore you all, but if you were in class, I would totally bore you all and make you see where the quadratic formula came from. It's really cool. It's math that you could understand, but we'll save that for later since we're already stuck deep in e-learning at this moment in time. So the quadratic formula says we can solve all quadratics by just plugging into a formula. And this formula says x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And all of you rolling your eyes at me right now, just hold on to it. Keep your eyes in your head. Okay, this formula seems really big compared to other formulas we have done in the past, but my students love this formula. In fact, some of my students use this formula every single time, and that's okay. The quadratic formula works every single time. To use the quadratic formula, though, we have to make sure we're in the correct format. And the format for the quadratic formula is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So we're back to needing to be equal to 0. Completing the square is sort of the odd one where we're equal to the constant. Okay, so you're probably going to want a calculator. So if you don't have your own handheld calculator, use the one that I have linked on our Canvas page. Okay, and let's start talking about what we're going to do here. So let's say we're given 2x squared plus 8x plus 6 equals 0. Now, first thing I will say is nothing says on this particular problem that we have to use the quadratic formula. So some of us might choose to solve by factoring, but we're going to go ahead and do quadratic formula today just so we can practice when we're in nice, easy problems, because tomorrow we'll have to use the quadratic formula. So, right, sometimes in class we pretend. We're pretending right now that we can't solve by anything else that we've already learned. So if we're going to use the quadratic formula, the first thing that we are going to do, so step one, I guess I'll set my calculator over here, is we are going to find a, b, and c. So just like a trinomial, right? A is what's in front of x squared, so my a is going to equal 2. My b is what's in front of the x, so my b is going to equal 8. My c is going to equal 6. Okay, so I found a, b, and c, check, step one, done. I wish you guys could see my dog right now. She's laying underneath the table I'm working at, basically taking up all my foot space like she owns the whole world down there. Step number 2, okay, we are then going to plug into the formula. And for right now, you are going to have to sort of compare back and forth because you don't know the formula. And you might say, I'm never going to know that formula. But you will after you do it a few times. My students are like, oh yeah, this isn't that bad. Okay, so we're going to say x equals negative b. Now remember, we can read this as subtraction. We can read this as a negative, but we can also read it as the opposite. So what we're really doing is taking the opposite sign of b. So b right now is 8. So I'm going to make that a negative 8. So yes, I know many of you are probably thinking, if that was a negative 8, would I make it a positive? Yep, absolutely. Okay, so plus or minus. I'm going to put a big old long square root bar. And it's important, all of this stuff is inside the square root. B squared. So my b is 8. Now again, if we're going to be using our calculator, those parentheses are going to be important sometimes. So we're just going to keep putting those parentheses in there. Minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is 6. All over, so one big long fraction bar, all over 2 times a. So all over 2 times a is 2. Okay, so all I've done is at this point is replace the numbers inside that formula with the numbers that they're now equal to. Okay, if you can get past that piece and just sort of slowly get each number in the right place, everything else you can basically do in your calculator. Okay, so step 3, we are going to simplify inside the square root. Okay, so you can pick up your calculator. Do not type the square root into your calculator, only the stuff underneath it. And I'm going to type it in just like I see it. So 8, so parenthesis 8, parenthesis squared, minus 4 times 2 times 6. Okay, so underneath the square root, I now have 16. Now, I'm not going to write this as a step. Hopefully, we're all okay with just turning 2 times 2 into 4. Okay, our next step is going to be to take the square root. Now, when we are taking the square root, that might just be that we're prime factoring and simplifying the square root. But in this case, right, the square root of 16 is 4. And again, if you say, I don't know, in your calculator, you could do second x squared 16. So now we have negative 8 plus or minus 4 all over 4. Right? I'm just letting my calculator do the work for me. Just plugging and chugging. Okay, next step. I am going to calculate both options. So this plus or minus means 2 different things. In one situation, it's a plus, and in one situation, it's a minus. Everything else is the same. So negative 8 plus 4 over 4, and negative 8 minus 4 over 4. Now, hopefully some of this you could do in your head, but if you need to use your calculator, it's fine. You just have to really make sure you're using your calculator correctly here. Okay, it's really easy to think you're doing it correctly and you're not. You can't type this in one big thing. So you need to do negative 8 plus 4 equals divided by 4. Okay, so on top, when we simplify this down, we get negative 1. We could do the same thing on the bottom if we wanted to. So, negative 8 minus 4, we could do negative 12 divided by 4, or if you need your calculator, equals, and we get negative 3. So our answer for this is x equals negative 1 and negative 3. 2 answers, just like we've been getting with the past quadratics we've been looking at. Okay, so it takes a lot of steps, but most of it we can do in our calculator. So let's look at another one here without those steps in between and see how we do. So let's say 5y squared minus 4y minus 9 equals 0. Okay, so we're going to find a, b, and c. A is 5. B is negative 4. C is negative 9. So we're going to start plugging into our quadratic formula, right? We're going to start plugging into this thing. So we're going to say negative b, or the opposite of b. So the negative of negative 4 is positive 4. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. So negative 4 squared. Minus 4, this 4 is just because of the 4 that's already in the formula. Times a, which is 5, times c, which is negative 9, all over 2 times 5. Okay, so now we're going to simplify under the square root. Again, you can just use your calculator. So parenthesis, negative 4, close parenthesis, minus 4 times 5 times negative 9. Oops, I forgot my square. That's my problem. I was like, that's number's not right. Okay, let me try that again. So parentheses negative 4 squared. There we go. Minus 4 times 5 times negative 9. So if you weren't agreeing with me, you were probably right. So 196. That looks much better. All over, right? 2 times 5 gives us 10. Now I'm going to take the square root of 196. So if you don't know it, just put it in your calculator. And I get 14. So 4 plus or minus 14 all over 10. And I'm now going to calculate both options. 4 plus 14 over 10 and 4 minus 14 over 10. So if you're using your calculator, right, 4 plus 14 equals divided by 10. So all you decimal lovers, yes, if you put 1.8, you will be fine. But you know, in Mrs. McKinney's world, I tend to do things with fractions more. But you won't be wrong, right? This will be a 1.8 would be fine. You could put it as a 1 4/5. Okay, you could put it as a 9/5. Either way, if it's multiple choice, you just have to find the correct option. Okay, then we'll do the same thing on the bottom. So 4 minus 14 is negative 10 over 10, which equals negative 1. So these would be our two answers. Okay, let's look at x squared minus 2x equals negative 9. So we should recognize when we look at this that this is not the correct format for the quadratic formula. We need it to be equal to 0. So if it is not in the correct format, we're going to have to do some rearranging, right? If we want this equal to 0, we're going to have to undo subtracting 9 by adding 9. So this will turn into an x squared minus 2x plus 9 equals 0, right? I can't add this 9 to the 2x because they're not like terms. Okay, then our a is going to be 1 because we don't see a number in front of it, so there's really a 1 there. B is negative 2. C is 9. Okay, so we'll say negative b. So the negative of negative 2 is positive 2. Plus or minus b squared, so negative 2 squared, minus 4 because that's part of the formula, times a, which is 1, times c, which is 9, all over 2a. Okay, so I'm going to do inside the square root next. Negative 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times 9 equals. Okay, so I have 2 plus or minus, and as soon as I get here, right, we've said this multiple times, as soon as we are there, as there is a negative underneath the square root, whether step 1, whether step 100, we are going directly to a no real solution.